who feels led can pray for us. It's only one.
Together one more time to deliberate on issues that would help our nation. We ask that you would come and direct us. We pray that you would help us to think rightly. We pray that wisdom will prevail in this room and also would have the peace of mind to think aright. We thank you and we bless you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you very much. Lord, I would want to acknowledge the open partnership, EITI International. They are online today with us again. So if Edwin, you can hear me, just wave at us so we know we acknowledge you. So we have Edwin Warden, we have Lucia. Okay, so Edwin, wave at us if we can, you can hear us. Very good. And then we also have Lucia. Lucia, wave at us if you can hear us. Very well. So Lucia would replace our first speaker, who's Gilbert, the regional director. I'm sure we heard. So before we continue, let me also acknowledge the presence of our team leader, Mr. Benedict Doe. Please wave at us. Thank you very much. And then we will now pass the microphone round for those who are coming today. Those who couldn't come yesterday would also know who and who is there. So I'm passing the microphone round. Just mention your name, your organization, and the region. Your name, your organization, and the region where you're coming from. Thank you.
My name is Roxon Jima, OSP Accra.
I'm Ferdinand Apia Kudia, Economic and Organized Crimes Officer, Accra.
I'm Gerald Kwampare, Yoko Accra.
I am Chimsi Mohamed Hafiz, IAA, Accra.
I am Idris Usamuddin, IAA, Accra.
Fatima Hami, Shraj Tema.
I'm John Buffo, IE Accra.
I'm Isian Samuel, IAA, Accra.
Tete Tuo, Shraj, Accra. James Makakun, Shraj, Accra.
James Mensah, Shraj, Kumasi.
Ruby Asari, Shraj. Accra.
Eugenia Apia, Accra.
Isaac Cho, Bonny East Regional Coordinator Council, Internal Audit.
This is Makadunga Yorko, NOPRA, CSU, this in Bolgatanga.
Waxi Baluki Amukaila, CRCC, Cape Coast.
Roseni Mapia, Shraj, Takrade.
Joyce Yopa Kransima, ALCC Kumasi.
Michael Inkansan Shraj, Koforudia.
Samola Santia Boa Shraj, Obuasi.
Anthony Hajo, ERCC, Koforudia.
Stephen Kwashi, Western RCC, Secondary.
Solomon Kambe, Upper East RCC, Bolgatanga.
Edward Arthur, UT RCC.
George Ampomajesi, for RCC, Goso.
Sean Henry, I'm from the FIC.
I'm Benedict Do, Ghana Integrity Initiative.
I'm Godfred Agu White, Yoko Accra.
Yvette Anthea Osu, FIC. Accra.
Albert Akurugu, OSP, Accra.
Issa Faiza, Upper West Regional Coordinating Council.
Sebo Zoma Jr., IAA Accra.
Hadi Amponsa, IAA Accra.
Estana Kinyama, IAA Accra.
Gifty Amponsa, Iyoko, Accra.
Daniel Amosa, Shraj, Cape Coast.
Shaib Mohammed Misbah, NRCC, Tamale.
Abdallah Musa Anas, NERCC, Nairobi.
Ibu Pratt, FIC.
FIC is only in Accra. Thank you very much. Now we know who is in the room. Permit me to also acknowledge Dr. Eric Osai, the Director General, Internal Audit Agency. Please, if you can hear me, wave at us. He's online. If you can hear me, please wave at us. Hello? He says he can hear us. The sound, please. Okay, so Dr. Director General, Internal Audit Agency can hear us. I can hear him speak. So if he says he can hear us, so he would wave at us, and he will be joining us also very soon. He's been a very active supporter of CSO ever since 2006 or beyond. So he's an active advocate for CSO and a friend of CSOs as well. We will also acknowledge our sponsor or donor, our sponsor or partner. That is the Open Extractive. Is an active partner of ours. And then there are also other partners. We have Shraj, we have Gati, we have the Internal Audit Agency, and we have Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition. They are all key partners in this program. Now we will take the first presentation, and it will be done by Lucia Crimello. She is at the EITI International. If Lucia is ready, we'll take Lucia's presentation. Thank you. Right, so Lucia is online. She's projecting.
Michael, can you hear me?
The sound, so give us a minute. We'll wave at you when we are done, yeah?
Okay.
Let's take the floor.
Brilliant. Good morning. I hope everyone can hear me well. It is a pleasure to be with you today at such an important event. I am the program manager of Opening Extractives at the EITI, and my short presentation today will focus on an introduction to the EITI and to the Opening Extractives program, and on priority areas where we can work together to use beneficial ownership information to tackle corruption and illicit financial flows. So first of all, starting by the EITI, this is a global standard for transparency and accountability in the oil, gas, and mining sectors, and supports national stakeholders in implementing extractive sector reforms. Our mission is to promote understanding of natural resource management, to strengthen public and corporate governance and accountability, and to provide the information to basically support policymaking and multi-stakeholder dialogue in the extractive sector. By becoming a member of the Extractives Industries Transparency Initiative, countries commit to disclose information along the extractive industry value chain, from how extractive rights are awarded to how revenues make their way through government and how they benefit the public. Through participation in the EITI, more than 65 countries have agreed to a common set of rules governing what has to be disclosed and when, which is the EITI standard. So the EITI has a multi-stakeholder approach. By promoting collaboration between government, civil society, and the private sector, data and debate can be leveraged to strengthen extractive sector governance. Independent and peer-reviewed research has demonstrated how this specific feature of the EITI can contribute to national outcomes such as improved investment climate, increased tax revenue, economic development, governance reform, and it mitigates corruption and builds accountability in resource governance. So under the standard, the EITI requires for all countries to ensure that companies that apply for or hold a participating interest in an oil, gas, or mining license or contract in the country disclose beneficial owners. And why is this important? Because the real owners of extractive companies, known as beneficial owners, are often kept anonymous or hidden by a chain of shell companies. And I believe that a lot of this has been discussed in yesterday's event. And this can be a particular challenge in the extractive industries, where knowing who has the rights to extract oil, gas, and minerals is key to address risks of corruption or conflicts of interest. Beyond understanding who are the beneficial owners, what we support through the EITI is that information should include the identity of the beneficial owner, including the name, nationality, the country of residence, and whether the owner is politically exposed. It can also include the date of birth, a national identity number, residential address, and other data points. Implementing countries are also recommended to maintain a public register of beneficial owners, and the information must at least be published in EITI reports. So the EITI has been able to deliver practical results through the inclusion of beneficial ownership information in licensing and company registration processes, as well as through the EITI reporting. Publishing details of company ownership can help close channels for corruption, enable effective taxation, building fairer markets, encouraging responsible investment, and also to manage business risk. Addressing these issues will remain critical also as the energy transition gathers pace. So now on to the Opening Extractives program, which is what Michael was mentioning before. We are collaborating with Ghana Integrity Initiative on this event. So the Opening Extractives program is currently being implemented by the EITI and Open Ownership. And it is a global program which aims to transform the availability and use of beneficial ownership data for effective governance in the extractive sector. The program combines political and technical engagement with participating countries to implement reforms on beneficial ownership disclosure. The program is also supported by the BHP Foundation, which is the main founder. Ghana is one of the selected countries implementing the program and is one of our key partner countries since 2021. And we are very proud to have collaborated with many agencies and local stakeholders to advance this matter of beneficial ownership transparency. So the program is a 5-year program, and it has 3 key objectives. The first one is related to high quality and open disclosure of beneficial owners. But disclosure or transparency is not enough. Stakeholders should be able to use this information. And therefore, that's why our second objective focuses on building capacity of government and local stakeholders to use and analyze data. And in order to ensure that all these learnings inform future policy and can help countries to implement robust reforms, our third objective focuses on developing and communicating relevant insights on the impact of this reform in the extractive industries and include opportunities for global and regional peer exchange and research that can inform best practice. So today's training focuses on use and analysis of the information, basically on partnering with stakeholders that can ensure that beneficial ownership information is one of the data sets that can be used to support their own outcomes. So one of the expected outcomes related to this is that government authorities and anti-corruption agencies are skilled on using beneficial ownership and relevant extractive sector data in their oversight roles, such as for regulating license allocation through due diligence, undertaking tax compliance and revenue auditing, or investigating red flags in obscure corporate structures. And so moving to a more practical level of working. For the past 2 years, we have been supporting governments to disclose and use beneficial ownership information. And a few examples of how opening extractives can collaborate with government agencies are, for example, to embed beneficial ownership in the licensing process for due diligence purposes, to build capacity to use beneficial ownership to conduct anti-money laundering investigations or financial investigations more generally, to use beneficial ownership in procurement processes for more transparent public contracting, or to combine beneficial ownership information with other disclosures to identify corruption risks or conflict of interests of politically exposed persons. So I will end by saying that we stand ready to provide support in the priorities that Ghana identifies and that stakeholders identify today.
Excited. We are even more excited because of the prospect of going forward. You will all. Currently we are expecting Samuel Bequim. He's not here, but we have Dr. Eric Osai Odro online. I want to find out if Doc is ready with his presentation so that we can take him whilst we wait for Samuel. We also have Favor, the Anglophone African Regional Manager of Open Ownership Online. If he's online, yes, Favor is online. Favor, can you turn on your camera and wave at us? Very well, Favor. Favor, do you have a word or two to share with us? Because you're supposed to do this jointly with Lucia. So we will give you the screen and the audience are yours for 5 minutes so you share your reflection short right now. Thank you.
Perhaps
okay,
I
so
will
yes,
intervene very
Edwin, please.
briefly.
Yes, please.
Yes, great. So, Mr. Bodi, I think Favor and Samuel were collectively meant to deliver a session on really helping us understand the complexities around beneficial ownership disclosure and making that very simple to us. So I think it would be a good segue for her to get the next around 20 minutes to present on her slides and have a discussion around BIO before we go into the subsequent sessions from my side and of course from Doc's side. But I hope that works. And if someone jumps in, then he can complement Favor's work. But they have spoken together and will be sharing around the same theme.
Do we know who just spoke? Edwin, can you introduce yourself so we know who just spoke?
Sorry, Edwin Warden here. I'm the Anglophone Africa Country Officer working at the EITI. So I lead our implementation support to Ghana and a couple of other countries in the region, and been working very closely with Mr. Bwedi to make this event possible.
Thank you. So Edwin, yes, so we will take Favor for the next 20 minutes, and when Samuel comes in, we will make progress then. So Favor,
thank you very much, Mr. Bodi. I think I'm going to do a bit of work with you, if that's okay. I would like this to be an interactive session, so maybe you can be my man on the ground. First of all, I don't think I'm going to be able to share my screen. I just tried to do that, and it's created some complications where I can't unmute myself. So whilst we're doing the first set of very quick exercises, I don't know if any of my colleagues can kindly share screen for me. So, Mr. Bodi, I want to get a sense of what our understanding is on beneficial ownership. I did get some sense of that from yesterday's session, but I want to get people in the room talking. I know that we have some internal auditors represented. we have people from Shraj, we have Gaiety represented, we have GII represented. So we have these four, key parties represented amongst other people as well, but these are the ones I can easily remember. So my question to the people on ground, and it would be great to have 2 male speakers, 2 female speakers. When you think about beneficial ownership transparency within the context of fighting corruption, can you tell me what 2 words or maximum 3 words come to mind? When you think about beneficial ownership transparency, what comes to mind? So if you can kindly help me, go around the room and just get 4 responses, 2 male, 2 female, so we can have a balanced.
Each bench will volunteer 1 person. Who will do that for us from the first bench? While the second bench gets ready. I am very democratic, so I would volunteer somebody if nobody volunteers themselves. Okay. Since it's a female, male, female, male, and I'm tempted to come to Madame. What do you understand by beneficial ownership? We should go this way and come that way. Okay, I take your suggestion, but I know that a friend and a colleague is here. Will say something.
Okay. Okay, what comes to mind is disclosure.
So disclosure, 1 word, right? So the male, let's redeem ourselves. Oh. Okay, you are ready. Sure. He's in a hurry to redeem the men.
Okay, so my understanding is basically knowing those who own and control, in our case, the extractive companies. We are looking at issues right up from when contracts or agreements are signed through, let's say, the extraction of the raw materials up to when they are sold and bought. In this chain of events, we want to know who are benefiting from what, who is in control, and who owns these extractive companies. That's my understanding.
Another woman wants to throw a challenge to the men.
It's just a top up to the final point or the final part of the question as to in terms of fighting corruption. So when we get to know all these things, for instance, in terms of conflict of interest, you get to know who is actually involved, and then you find a way of eliminating that person from a particular tender or something that is on the ground. Thank you.
Let me clarify the elimination. It means that you set the person aside or the person recuses themselves, but not the kind of elimination that we attempted to think of. Right. So now we are here. The men are still a goal down, and we are in a World Cup season. Yeah.
Like we all know, in the world of business, income flows from a number of channels in terms of profits, or if it is about investment, then you are talking about interest. Even beyond that, you can also talk about dividends. And the question is, these streams of income, at the end of the day, who do we get these incomes ending up with? And so yesterday, what struck me in one of the presentations was that if we talk about even owners, you might go to Registrar General and see some names there, but the names you find there officially might not even be the final beneficiaries. And so for me, thinking through as a business person, that's the thing that comes to mind. Who does the final profit ends up with? Who does the final interest end up with? Who does the final dividend ends up with? So all these streams of income, who enjoys it at the end of the day. And that's the person we want to know, but not just the person whose name is on some document somewhere. People whose names are on the documents are the starting point for us. So when we go to Registrar General, we might find some names there. But if we end there, then the question raised as to are they the actual beneficiaries, or we still have some people behind them. And so the entire idea of BO for me is to do some due diligence and track to the end. Who does all these things end up with? That's what that's how I see it actually.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dole. So, Favor, the men and the women had redeemed themselves. Gender had balanced. You have the audience.
Thank you very much for taking that quick exercise there. And thank you everyone for contributing. There are a number of really important points that were mentioned, and I feel like I'm preaching to the converted. We heard some certain phrases like who is in control, conflict of interest. At the end of the day, who is taking the final profit, who is taking the final dividends. And I think we're all thinking about this in the right direction. But there's one common thread that I want to point out from every speaker that had the mic in the past few minutes. There is a particular word that everybody used, and that word is who. And Edwin, if you can just go to my slides. And I'm going to explain why that word, that pronoun is extremely important. So my first slide is essentially just showing, thank you. So for ease of communication, I'm going to be using the acronym BOT. It just means Beneficial Ownership Transparency. And I think we've all defined this very well. But just to put it simply, it just means transparency over who ultimately owns, and that's something that was captured in the contributions that we just had, controls and or benefits from companies. So like you rightly said, what we're trying to do when we talk about beneficial ownership transparency is we want to lift the corporate veil. And sometimes I give this seemingly funny example of if a gentleman meets a lady, the ladies were usually very keen to lift that initial veil, you know, and just really find out what is the intention of this young man for my life. That's usually our question, especially when we're thinking long term. A man can come with a flashy car, can come looking very good, but then we want to find out the intention behind what we're seeing, you know, or behind what the person is presenting to us. So just using that example, it's the same thing with corporate governance. We want to lift the corporate veil. You have this nice company, you have these names of directors, names of shareholders, but the question is, are those the same people that are actually controlling, owning, or benefiting from that company? So my next slide, please. Yep, so BOT essentially answers the question, who benefits from the company? And what I'm going to try and show with my next slide and subsequent slides is, how does this actually play out in practice? We're talking about, you know, who has the final profit, who has the final dividend, you know, the conflict of interest issues that BO information can help us identify, who is in control. You know, we're talking about this in the right direction, but practically speaking, how does this play out in reality? Next slide, please. So ownership structures can be simple, right? You can have, like you see on the screen, a South African company, and you have a Ghanaian person that owns this South African company, right? And there are a few points I want to pull out from this slide. The first, which I've already said, is ownership structures can be as simple as you're seeing it on the screen. You can go to the RGD today and you request for information from company A. And when you look at the documents, you realize that it is a human being, the who, the person, natural person that actually owns company A. Now, it is also possible, like the last speaker rightly said, that if you still go to the RGD, you ask for information of company A, you get information that person B is the owner of company A. If you can go back to my next slide, please, to my last slide rather. But then it's also possible that person B is holding those shares in trust or on behalf of somebody else. So the point I'm trying to make here is, if you have a document before you, if you have data before you, if you're analyzing any sort of data on legal ownership or beneficial ownership, we shouldn't be quick to conclude that because there is a direct link between a human being and a company, automatically that human being is the beneficial owner. So essentially, person B in this structure that you can see on the screen can wear two different hats. The hats of a legal owner. Legal ownership simply means title. I have title to shares. My name is on the documents. I'm the legal owner. But am I the beneficial owner? If I am the beneficial owner, then I'm wearing two hats. I'm wearing the hat of a legal owner, and I am also wearing the hat of a beneficial owner. But it is also possible that I'm wearing the hat of a legal owner, but I have a contract with my boss in Mauritius. And my boss has told me, oh, Favor, you're going to, I'll use your name as a shareholder in this company I'm setting up. But then every money that comes at the end of the year, the final profits, the final dividends that, you know, the last gentleman was talking about, the monies go to my boss's account, my boss in Mauritius, not to my account. So we can see how it is definitely possible to have a seemingly simple corporate structure, but there is actually another layer behind the person. And this brings me to my next slide, which shows how ownership and control structures can be complex. And the complexity comes in different ways. It comes in the fact that some of these ownerships and control interests can be spread across different jurisdictions. If you look carefully at the diagram in front of you, you can see up to 4 different flags representing 4 different jurisdictions. You can see different types of arrangements, different types of agreements. There's a trust there, there is a contract there. So in most scenarios, you would get companies that have complex structures like this. So if you look at this now, the beneficial owners are persons F, persons G, and person H, because they are the natural persons at the end of the chain. And this is the reason why when everybody was talking about what they think beneficial ownership means, also within the context of corruption, you're always trying to answer one question, who benefits? And the who is always going to be a natural person. That is one of the biggest takeaways I want us to, learn from this presentation. A beneficial owner is always a natural person. A company cannot make decisions for itself, even though we know that legally speaking, a corporate entity has its own identity separate from the shareholders and the directors. But we all know that the only way a corporate entity can survive and act and transact is through the directors, through the shareholders, all of whom are human beings. So a beneficial owner must be a natural person. That's why if you have a scenario like you're seeing on the screen, the beneficial owner of the declaring company, which is company A at the bottom, that's the company that is declaring its beneficial ownership, are persons F, person G, and person H. So these are the beneficial owners of company A. And if you look at this carefully, you can see that there are certain obstacles in your way to finding out who those persons are. And that just shows that this is a highly complex matter. It's a highly complex concept. And as opposed to what you saw in my previous slide, a lot of these scenarios present themselves like what you're seeing on the screen, where you have companies in between. So person F does not have a direct relationship with company A. It has an indirect relationship with company A. Same with person G, same with person H. And that relationship exists through trustee, company E, contract B, company C. Now, if you Google the corporate structure of Amazon, you will be blown away by how many companies, how many subsidiaries, and how many different layers of companies around the world that exist between the main company and the actual owners of that group of companies. So this is just to show you that we're dealing with a highly complex subject matter. And a lot of people are getting wiser. Lawyers are getting incredibly smarter by the day. Accountants, auditors are getting smarter by the day. And they're using tax havens and secrecy jurisdictions to spread interest around, and sometimes to hide interest as well. So my next slide is just to amplify what I've just spoken about. Now, there are specific legal devices like trusts, contracts, and subsidiaries that can be used to obscure interest. So we've already established that a beneficial owner must be a natural person, and that natural person must be the person that ultimately owns, controls, or benefits from the activities of that company. And we've also established that in a lot of the cases, it's not always easy to find that direct link between the company and the natural person. If it was that easy, we probably wouldn't be in the room today talking about this. So it is because companies are being used as vehicles and conduits for corruption, and we don't know who we're transacting with, we don't know who we're giving our mining licenses to. That's the reason why we need to unpack this concept. So what the slide is simply telling us is between the company itself and the owners, the ultimate owners, a lot of the time, certain things exist in between, in the middle. And these things are essentially legal devices like a trust, a contract. I'll give an example. We have a company called Shraj, for instance, Shraj Energy Limited. And you have myself and Michael as the shareholders, 50-50%. But then it's also very possible that Edwin, who just spoke a few minutes ago, has told me that Favor, I want to be a part of Shraj, but I'm running for president next year and I don't want people to be aware that I have interest in this company, in this energy company. So I'm going to sign a contract with you, a nominee agreement, like you can see on the screen with you, where you're going to stand in for me as the shareholder. So to the human eye, it's easy for people to think that I am the beneficial owner, but I'm not, because there is a nominee agreement that is standing in the way of the interest that Edwin has in Shraj Energy Limited. So this just shows that there are so many legal constructs, so many ways that people can actually obscure their interest. And this underscores the reason why we need to be having this conversation, and we need to be able to understand this concept and how it plays out in reality. So essentially what I'm saying here is the people at the top, persons G, F, H in the other diagram, and the three gentlemen that I showed in the diagram in my last slide are usually the beneficial owners. The people at the top are the ones that ultimately own or control the company, and those are the people that we're interested in. Next slide. But unfortunately, obscured, corruption is enabled. And this is the concept that we've already understood and made earlier. So to make this a bit more simple, I've tried to put a few diagrams on the screen, and I'd like you to just walk through it with me. So companies or people can own other companies. The subject matter here is companies. That's the common denominator, like they taught us in math class. So in a direct loan, well, in some instances, the natural person can be acting in the capacity of the legal owner and also the beneficial owner. So on the second diagram, you can see that the company, the common denominator, can be owned by another company. And I showed that in my last two slides where I showed the complex structures. So it's very possible that a company is owned by another company, and it can just keep going on and on and on. Now, the third one is ownership through an arrangement, contract, or trust. And this is what I try to explain with the example of Edwin and I having that nominee agreement, so that Edwin can own shares, although somewhat secretly, in Shraj Energy Limited. So what we can see here is a company being owned by a person through an arrangement, which can be a nominee agreement, it can be some sort of contract, it can be some sort of trust agreement. So if you can just click enter. Yes, thank you. But ultimately, like I keep saying, it's people that ultimately benefit from the activities of companies. And that is a fact. That's the reason why we're having this conversation. And that's the reason why we need to be able to improve transparency. The RGD needs to be able to make this data available. And that's why they are, collaborating partners around the ownership transparency. So if you can click, thank you very much, seeing in the past few minutes now. So we have the declaring company at the bottom, right? And then we have company A that directly owns this declaring company, like I explained in my last slide. And then we have person that directly owns company A. Now, my question, well, maybe I'll leave this question to the end, but the immediate question that comes to mind here is, who is the beneficial owner? And that's the person in this case. But then the person is a beneficial owner indirectly because their ownership and control interest is indirectly held through company A. In some instances, ladies and gentlemen, this person can have interest or ownership or control in the declaring company through company A, B, C, D, E. Can you draw up what this looks like diagrammatically? And that's what I've tried to do with this slide. So essentially, you have direct interest and you have indirect interest. So with the Edwin, Favor, and Shraj Energy example, Favor has a direct interest in Shraj Energy, even though that interest is not a beneficial ownership interest. It is Edwin that has a beneficial ownership interest, although indirectly through that nominee agreement that Edwin has with Favor in Shraj Energy Limited. So that's essentially what this slide is trying to depict to us. So the next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Favor. Perhaps we can go to Michael on the ground to read the room to see this, if everyone is with you and if there's any 1-2 questions we can pick before we go to the next slide.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I do have an exercise at the end, but I'm very happy to get people's thoughts at this point or any questions on what we've shared so far.
Yes, so Favor, there are a couple of questions. We'll take them.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Wonderful presentation so far. We're really enjoying it. I'm trying to find out what is the intention. Let me paint one particular scenario you just used. If I want interest in company A, and I'm doing so not directly as a legal person, but for instance, I'm doing it through 3 or 4 subsidiaries, which are all companies, corporate entities, instead of being a person. So I'm having company A, company B, company C, which I'm all a beneficial owner of, and company A, B, and C all have shares or are shareholders in company A. Why would anyone want that kind of arrangement? What's usually the reason why people want that sort of arrangement? I think it's important to understand the motivations as well if you want to go to unravel all these layers that often present themselves in this structure.
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so I'll take that. So I think there's something very important to highlight, which your question has brought to the fore. So we talk about beneficial ownership transparency as a tool to fight corruption. And I agree that it's definitely a tool, but it must be said that not every beneficial owner is a criminal or has the intention to hide their interest. Sometimes people have these very complex corporate structures for commercial reasons, which are purely legal. I'll give you an example of one of these motivations. So let's say Aquafina. I think Aquafina should be a popular water producing company in Ghana, or Eva Water. I think one of those should be popular. So imagine if you know Aquafina or Eva Water, for instance, to be water producing companies. You drink their water, maybe they do juice as well, they do beverages, right? And then the same company wants to venture into pharmaceuticals, for example. And then you see Eva Water Pharmaceuticals Limited. I can almost guarantee you that the reception of that new company by the public, like if Eva Water decides to go into selling pharmaceuticals without changing their name or without incorporating a new company, a subsidiary company called, say, Zenith Pharmaceuticals, something a bit more neutral, it might be difficult for them to make progress in that new market. So that's one purely commercial reason why companies can have so many subsidiaries and so many companies in between simply because they're trying to branch out into different sectors, and they need to be able to maintain that, brand new presence and not affect the branding that they've already built in the market. Another example is during negotiations. If MTN wants to go into the sector or wants to do business with someone, it's very possible, and I've had an instance where a big hotel wanted to do some business with a colleague of mine. They wanted the person to do some commercial for them. They went through another person to say, oh, please, can you do a small commercial for me? Only for my colleague to realize that, oh, the commercial he did was for a big multinational, and he didn't charge the multinational the way he would have ordinarily charged the multinational if he knew that he was dealing with that sort of big company. So sometimes companies strategically, register so many subsidiaries and have very convoluted, complex ownership structures for commercial purposes. But there are also instances where companies or people actually hide or try to hide their ownership interest because they're clearly doing things that are not right. I'll give an example: procurement contracts. We have so many cases of procurement contracts within the African region where you have a road that is budgeted for every year, given to different companies, but then you see the names of the companies. It's not anybody that you know, but when you dig deeper, you realize that it's actually the same officers that awarded that particular tender. So because people want to take advantage of resources that are available to them, because people know that, oh, I'm in power, I have access to information, I have access to these resources, let me incorporate a company but exclude myself from the papers. So people can use that route to proceed with money laundering, illicit financial flows, monopolizing contracts, and other anti-corruption or corruption-related activities that we are currently fighting against. So I've given you a balanced approach in terms of clearly legal, commercial, strategic reasons why people have these complex structures, but also other reasons why people do this that we're clearly fighting against. And sometimes people just want to lay low. They just want to do their business and want to live a very simple life. That's another reason why people can say, I don't want to be seen in this company. I just want to be receiving profits. I don't want to be a part of it. So there are quite a number of reasons, both good and bad, why people approach the use of companies in these different ways.
Perhaps, Favor, I can just use a very relevant and recent example from Ghana just to nail this point also, in addition to what you said, because I'm sure a lot of people will have that question. So
yes, please.
On quickly commercial reasons, for many of you who have been following the Jubilee Oil Holding Limited case, the Deputy Minister, Honorable Japa, did mention that part of why the company was set up as a subsidiary of GNPC was because of the timeliness, commercial timeliness around the deal. That is why Anadako had to, for example, work with GNPC to set up a company as a temporary interim measure, make the initial sort of transfer, and then when GNPC is ready, they would move the ownership of that company as in how they would want it. So there was a commercial reason. And then when you look at the sort of, there's also a very good reason when it comes to nominees, for example, where, you would want to get your son or your daughter, hand over some properties to your son or daughter, but that is a 5-year-old boy or girl that you don't want to be an owner of a company. So you, for example, establish a nominee arrangement or, through a trust, get your son owning an oil field, but through a trust or a nominee, so that when the son turns 18 or 25, when they are legally and probably intellectually ready to take up that ownership stake, then that will be transferred from the trust or from the nominee to the son. So those are some of the examples. But then there's, of course, the concerns of why do you establish this in a tax haven, for example, and again, for both commercial and non-commercial reasons, illicit and legal matters. We've seen many cases where companies would do that, because setting up a subsidiary in Seychelles or British Virginia Island allows you to have relatively less taxes, and companies operate to have less taxes. But it's the same also conduit that companies would then use to channel monies because there's little oversight. But we'll have some other slides later on where we can actually share more examples to shed light on this issue. But many thanks, and over to Favor in the room.
Thanks very much, Edwin. I don't know if there was another question from the ground, but that was the only one.
There's a question. So my question borders on the issue of obscurity, which you alluded to the use of legal devices such as a trust contract and so on and so forth. Sure. Yes, I bring. Please, do you hear me? Okay. So my question actually borders on the issue of obscurity, which you alluded to, using the legal devices, like you said, trust agreements and so on and so forth. And my question is, if two parties agree and the declaring person or company fails to declare that information or disclose that information to the competent authority, will this contract be enforceable between them, or does it stand vitiated by the fact that they refuse to disclose this vital information to the competent authority, being the Register of Companies?
So, Favor, did you hear that question? Sound. Favor, just a
Thank
minute.
you.
Wait, okay. Did you hear the question?
I think I got it, but if you can summarize, that would be good, so I don't miss
Basically,
out on
he's
on any
asking
points he
whether
made.
if somebody fails to declare or complete the BO form or registration at the various registry, what is the implication? Does it vitiate the establishment of the company? What are the penalties involved? That's not a question. Oh, okay, then please
Very
feel free.
much.
Okay.
I'm only saying if two persons use, let's say, the nominee agreement or a contract, and the declaring person, the person registering, fails to disclose the information about who actually owns or controls, that is the BO information. I'm saying that on the basis of that, can the two enforce the contract among themselves? Sorry, between themselves, or does the contract stand vitiated for failure to disclose that information, which is a requirement of the law?
That's a legal question. Thankfully, I have a bit of legal experience, so I could attempt to answer that. So, you're asking if two people get into a contract, a nominee agreement, for instance, the law has specifically said, companies should disclose their beneficial owners, and then that disclosure is not done. Will it vitiate the contract? Does it make the contract unenforceable? Does it make it null and void? I do not think it does. And first of all, it depends on who the responsibility to disclose is on. So if the responsibility to disclose is just on the company itself, then you have to remember that the contract is between two individuals. So the company's non-compliance to disclose cannot affect the validity of the contract. So that's one. But if the law says, I'm pretty sure that the law says all companies shall disclose, but I don't remember if the law says all beneficial owners shall disclose to the companies, and then the company should disclose to the RGD. If indeed the law has a requirement for beneficial owners to disclose their information to the companies and then to the RGD, then one could argue that that contract is potentially potentially in breach of existing obligations in the law. But I honestly don't think that would make the contract unenforceable. What that would just do is to make the contracting parties found wanting when you look at the compliance obligations in the Companies Act. So to sum up my answer to that question, because the more I respond to you, the more I get a clearer sense of my answer. One, the company is going to be in breach of the Companies Act, but it does not affect the validity of the contract. Two, the two parties will be in breach of the Companies Act. That's if they're required to disclose and they've not disclosed. But I don't think it actually affects the validity of that contract, because I'm sure the contract is very simple. All it says is, Mr. A, you're going to stand on behalf of me. It doesn't necessarily speak to beneficial ownership itself, like the specific regulations in, the Companies Act. So that would be my response. And to be completely honest, it's going to be difficult for the RGD to have oversight of all of these contracts and to be able to come in as a party to force any of those beneficial owners or legal owners to do the right thing. The only place the RGD can come in is when they are aware that there is a beneficial owner and the person has not disclosed. And the RGD can say, oh, I'm writing to you, I know that you're a beneficial owner, kindly disclose. So I don't think it affects the validity of the contract. And this is a legal question more than anything, to be completely honest. I don't think it affects the validity of the contracts. Yeah.
Thank you, Favor. Is there any other? Okay, so Sami is here. Just a minute. There is still an issue. Sami, can you take this question by virtue of the fact that you are very familiar with the BO regulation? Ideally, would have loved that the auditor, the Registrar General's rep had been here. But Sami is quite versed with the BO provisions in the Company Act. So, Sami, there is a question that, let the questioner ask the question himself, and then we want your perspective. We see both legal and compliance issues here, but just from the Ghana perspective, we want you to have a take.
Yes. I'm only trying to find out if I'm only trying to find out if people try to hide behind ownership of a company, and then so somebody is fronting for the other, and then they sign a very simple agreement, and the person that's the declaring person or company who registers fails to disclose the information signed. Would it be enforceable? Fail to disclose this information to the competent authority. And I'm sure you know why I'm asking this. Because
okay. So, Sami, please come from the what the penalties are.
Gentlemen, I'm actually coming from Registrar General's workshop to this place. So, first of all, the penalty for false information in Ghana's beneficial ownership regime, we do not recognize middlemen, and it includes formal and informal arrangement or agreement. Therefore, if you have signed agreement whatsoever, the person we want is the ultimate beneficial owner, which is the first person. We don't want the person with fronting. So that's why, RGD has been trying to also do some open workshop for lawyers and others as well. So that's the first one. So whether you have agreement or not, the person whose name has to be disclosed is the person who is the ultimate beneficial owner, either through benefiting, controlling the company, an ultimate owner, maybe through shareholding, both direct and indirect. So the definition, as Favor had presented, is direct and indirect. The penalties for false information, presentation of false information. First of all, it is clear in the law. It's a combination of 250 penalty unit, plus finds out that you've provided false information with evidence. They would also charge the administrative penalty as well. So that is the board of ORC has made that complete suggestion in their draft regulation, because on the middleman, the ultimate owner. And therefore, there were some challenges with external companies with law to also report on beneficial owners. Without that, you cannot incorporate. Without that, you cannot register. Neither can you even file for an annual returns. So they have been very strict. From now, even my own Limited by Guarantee Company, it was a back and forth because they were like, no, we need the beneficial owners now. I gave to my auditors, another issue with auditors are that because the audit was in 2021, they wanted to use the beneficial owners of 2021. And I was even telling them, no, use the current beneficial owners, else RGD won't agree. They didn't mind me because they didn't know I was the consultant who helping RGD. And they went straight and came back and forth, you know. So it doesn't matter. The current beneficial owners are the ones you have to, and it should be ultimate.
So
Thanks.
there is a question about its enforceability. I promise this. Dr. Osai would come from the legal perspective and will address that. So I have put that question in the freezer, and it will come up again. All in favor say aye. So the ayes have it. Now we will turn back to Favor and ask Favor to begin to descend. There are more questions that will come. So let's allow Favor to land gracefully, and then we can have 10 minutes of exchanges. I think it's okay. So just note your questions down, and let's allow Favor to land so she can continue with the train of thoughts. Favor, you have the audience.
Thank you very much. So while Samuel was speaking, I just double checked section 35 of the Companies Act, Act 992, has two disclosure obligations or two disclosure requirements. One, it requires every member of a company, if that member, that's a shareholder, is not a beneficial owner, subsection 2 requires that member to provide the particulars of the beneficial owner. So assuming, remember the scenario I gave between Edwin, Favor, and Shraj Energy Limited. So Favor, I'm required to go to the company and say, this is Edwin's details because he's the beneficial owner. That's one. Two, Shraj, upon receiving that information from me, is then supposed to move to the RGD and make a declaration. Now, whether all of these obligations affect the validity of the contract, I will strongly say no, because the contract is not done pursuant to the Companies Act. The contract is most likely done pursuant to an arrangement between the two people to say, oh, let's just have a contract and say, you hold this agreement with me, or you hold the shares for me, and then I'll take the benefit later. But if the contract is done pursuant to any provision of the Companies Act, then of course it will be directly in breach of these relevant provisions of the Companies Act. So that's my take, but I'm very keen to hear from the doctor on ground when he comes to open that freezer for the question. So I'll move on very quickly to the key takeaways. So essentially what I want us to go home with from my presentation is, these few takeaways. One, a beneficial owner is always a natural person. And that natural person that has that beneficial ownership interest has a duty to, disclose that interest to the company that they have that interest in. And then that company has a duty to disclose that to the RGD. And legal ownership is about title. It's not about benefits. Somebody can have title to that shareholding or the shares in a company. Someone can have title to a property, but may not be the same person benefiting from the property. We've had scenarios in Zambia where we had, I think, a minister that that got some properties while he was in office. He amassed a lot of properties, used his gardener's name as the owner of those properties, was telling his children that, hey, Charlie, I've secured your future and you have everything on check. Unfortunately, this man died an untimely death. And then the question was, who owns those properties? Is it the gardener? Has God come to his rescue to lift, his family out of poverty? So there was an interesting story around legal title and beneficial ownership. So legal ownership is really about the title. It's about the papers. But beneficial ownership is about the benefits. Who is the person that is actually taking the final dividends
Who is the person that is calling the shots in that company? And that's what we're concerned about. 3, an individual can be a legal and beneficial owner. I can wear 2 hats of a legal and beneficial owner, but it's also possible that I can wear the hat of a legal owner, but I'm standing in the gap, I'm fronting for somebody else. So that's also something to bear in mind. 4, there is huge value in legal ownership information. And I can categorically say this with evidence. The mining cadastre in Nigeria recorded a 150% increase in their revenue in 2022, simply because they looked at the CAC records, that's the RGD equivalent in Nigeria, and said, who are these people that will open companies? They won't pay statutory fees every year, and they'll dump the company, dump the millions of fees, open a fresh company, the same people, and then try and do the same thing for it. They kept losing money. And then once they just went to the CAC in Nigeria and said, I need the directors and shareholders of all these companies, they were able to start rejecting, superfluous applications from people that were trying to run away from their statutory responsibility. So that's a clear case in point of a ministry in the extractive sector that has benefited just from legal ownership. So think about how much more benefits lies when you use beneficial ownership information. So that's a case in point. The final thing is ownership structures can be simple. Favor, Shraj Energy Limited, direct, clear, short, and simple. But it can also be very, very complex. Favor in the mix, Michael in the mix, Edwin, 4 other companies in between, and then Shraj Energy Limited. So this is a highly complex concept, and this is the reason why we need to keep having these relevant conversations and improving our knowledge and capacity on how we address and use beneficial ownership as a tool to fight corruption, to identify conflicts of interest in procurement contracts, to really understand who is controlling the natural resources of the Republic of Ghana and, of course, other nations of the world as well. Thank you very much for listening. I do have a scenario, but I'm keen to also take your questions before I ask this question, or however way the chair will have it. But thank you for listening. My name is Favor from Open Ownership. We're partners with the EITI on the Opening Extractors Program, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you. And I'm on standby to have a bit of discussion before we wrap up this session. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you very much. Favor, Sami is here. Samuel is here. And so to bring the discourse home, Sami is going to use examples. So we look at, again, we're going to now look at the complex structure and the opaque ownership structures home. Use real life experience. So, Sami, are we ready? You present from here, but do you have the? Can you send the? Yeah. So. Well, but before we set Sami up, I'll take 2 questions for Favor, then we will do Sami shortly. So there were some questions. Well, let me go to Bright. Bright had a question, and then is there any other question? I've had 2 things about 3 questions from the men, and so our female participants are down by 3 goals. We are in the World Cup season. Please, will you redeem yourself? I see smiles somewhere. I'm tempted. Sorry? No, I'm not. I'm not coercing them. I'm making them participatory. We learned from Shraj yesterday. It's just participatory and ownership. So it's not by force. So if they have it, they should come and redeem themselves. But Bright will take the next question.
Thank you very much, Michael. I think maybe Samuel also will need to pay attention to this one, because I think he probably has the local to answer this. So I'm going back to base on this, the issue of the ownership. Assuming Jacob, for instance, my cousin, He's the one whose name is behind the company as a beneficial owner. All transactions are made in his name. Dividends are paid to him, to his account. Meanwhile, we don't even need an agreement. I just know he's my cousin, but I'm the one making the decisions as far as the company is concerned. The money that he's withdrawing, he's not sending it through my account. He's probably putting the youth back and bringing it to my house. So for all intents and purposes, I'm the actual beneficial owner. My question is the law really interested, the regime you are setting up, is he really interested in going beyond even the persons whose name and for all records is in the list, he attends meetings, although he's more or less my proxy, to attend that particular meeting. When there's evidence that says that, oh, he is actually not the beneficial owner, on paper, yes, but in practice, is his cousin who is making the shots. The monies are sent to his cousin's house. When I say evidence, I'm talking about this sort of evidence when there's really no paper trail, because it's not sending the money to me through an account where you can track and say, why is the money sent to Mr. B's account and who is Mr. B? He's delivering it by hand, shoot back to my house. Our conversations, our voice, I speak to him, he goes, he says the things I want him to say, and that's how I'm actually controlling the company. Do we want our regime to end where we just recognize the name, and without this, let's call it informal evidence, we are okay? Or should this evidence come to light? It's something that the regime wants to take care of and say, if we're able to prove, despite the paper trail, that you are actually the beneficial owner of that particular company, they should be able to deal with something like this. And either the records be corrected or I should recognize as a beneficial owner. Are you willing to go that below what I call a ground zero to dig that deep? Does the regime make provisions for that?
So, Sammy, can you, again, deal with the penalties? And then if the law enforcement agencies are here, false disclosure, what does it mean when you are investigating such issues? We will take some response from there. Before I come to Favor.
All right, thank you. So, Bright, as I said, the law will explain to you. So RGD staff is required to explain to you that regardless of whether your cousin, the aim of our legislation is who takes, as Favor said, the superior decision, who benefit finally. So the documentation will not matter a lot unless there have been allegation of false declaration that there may be some investigation. That's when they will be going into those documentation between you and your cousin and who does what or what does what. The explanation to you, as I think the first point of call would be disclosing beneficial ownership is not something that connotes illegality, or it doesn't mean you are a bad person. Just that we all want to be in a fair society. Disclose your beneficial ownership, your ownership. Let us know who is behind the company, who controls the company. Favor mentioned about 3 or 4 benefits. One is that, of course, we are anti-corruption body. It helps the fight against corruption. There is also another version that says that it helps to generate revenue as well. Imagine GRA knowing that the supplier of whatever you sell is the one person owns the company and also the supplying company. Therefore, they will ensure that there is arm's length relationship. They are not going to stop you from trading, but they will ensure. But where they do not know, it makes it very difficult, So the revenue generation aspect, even companies that are foreign companies, and that's why some of the lawyers have started informing their clients. Before you even come in, your due diligence about your partnership you form locally. Imagine you knew who are behind the companies you are forming partnership with, so that in the near future, there is no corruption allegation that may trigger some FCPA investigation into you, the external company. So they too, they have a benefit when it comes to beneficial ownership. But ours is straightforward. We don't care the agreement you have with your cousin, whoever is the superior. And once they are aware of that, they should be able to disclose that information, because in future, you may not be, the RGD may not be the investigative body. Maybe the police will be doing their investigation, CID, and then they will inform RGD about the fact that whatever their findings is, show clearly that this individual is the one that takes the final decision and benefits finally, but his name is not in the BO. And therefore, that RGD will have to trigger their penalties or administrative sanctions as well. Yes, for false declaration.
Therefore, do we have a Yoko representative here? Very good. So Yoko, when you are doing such an investigation and you discover that there is either false declaration or the person didn't disclose, what are the likely charges you would prefer against them if you are supposed to prosecute the person?
So basically, if there is false declaration, that will be misrepresentation. I mean, a false statement has been made, so that will be a misrepresentation. So then you would find the appropriate criminal charge under misrepresentation to profile, and then the Companies Act, which is the regime for the beneficial owners, as the gentleman has indicated earlier, also provides a criminal sanction to it. You can add those charges, because basically the end point is, I mean, to just disguise the ultimate beneficiary. So far as there is that intention to disguise the ultimate beneficiary, it's you can input some criminality to it. And I want to even maybe say this, that I mean, from earlier presentations, you notice that especially in complex structures, I mean, as in companies, the ultimate aim probably would be to shift attention from who are the real owners. Because be that as it may, people create, I mean, complex structures and related transactions between companies to do a lot of things. Beneficial ownership transparency may be an aspect of it, but people are doing it to evade taxes, to inflate their expenditure so that profits are less, so that they can pay less taxes. So it's a whole complex issue. But I mean, the scope of this workshop is to discuss beneficial owners and why people would try to hide behind companies to disguise their identity. So definitely you can input criminality to it. I mean, there is no two ways or hard and fast rule about it. I believe there is a way that you can input criminality.
Thank you. So the aim is, when you are doing your due diligence, so the internal auditors, when you are doing your due diligence, what are the risk areas that you want to look at? Shraj, when Shraj is doing their investigation, Yoko, what are the risk areas that you want to look at? Now, I am going to go, Sami, because we should have been on break now, but we were 13 minutes late in starting. So we want to take that 13 minutes quickly. We'll take 10 of the 13 minutes quickly. Am I being fair? Thank you. We are just taking 10 of the 13 minutes so that I will keep the liability, the 3 minutes, as my debt. So Sami will take us through just the structures too, and then we go for snack break.
Thank you very much. I think initial presentation, even before Favor had come in. Just let me quickly, because it's 10 to 15 minutes, I'll do just one of the case studies. GM Petroleum, currently Ake. Okay, good. In 2014-15, Ake came in later. When AGM came to Ghana and signed the petroleum contract, wanted a need for further, we CSOs, we wanted to know, why is it that they were giving some level of preferential treatment? So what we did was we tried to find out who owns the AGM Petroleum Ghana. And once the presentation come up, they will definitely show quickly. We dig and dig and dig and dig. We didn't know. It went up to companies registered in Gibraltar, companies registered in different tax havens. Unfortunately, we didn't know who was behind the AGM Petroleum. Fast forward the story, I think it was 2017-18, when AGM decided to sell to Ake. That was when we heard that our own Jospon came out and said he was part of the deal, but he had been doing, I think, round tripping, whereby he registered the company outside and came in as a foreign company. At the end of the day, they even sold it without his approval, because he was a minority shareholder or minority owner. So when they sold it to the billionaire, which is the Norwegian billionaire, they decided they will sell it to Aker, and Aker had taken over. And the reason being, what did Ghana do? We were kind of forced to change our laws to fit what Aker wanted. Yes, we did. One example, we didn't know who was behind before. One example, in Ghana, if we give you a block is like this. We give it to you. The moment you find oil, by law, it's supposed to reduce to the area that you have found the oil. Aker said they don't want that. Once they find the oil, they want to continue to hold on to the entire block. They don't want they don't want to relinquish for us to give to other people to do exploration. It was given to them. We went in to change our laws to fit what they wanted. They also said the sizes of the block was too small for them. We went in to change laws, give them what they want. Today we are here. Aker has still not produced an oil field that was already discovered before they even bought from. The idea being, we didn't know who was behind. We were trying to look at how those preferential treatment were provided. Unfortunately, because there was no beneficial ownership disclosure by then, we didn't have any idea. But there are multiple other examples as well, which has happened across different countries, whereby we have seen that the opportunity for people to hide behind very complex structures allows them to engage in certain actions that does not inure better to the country or even to the citizens of those countries. So I wanted to present some of the one or two examples to you so that you would know, but I'm not sure whether the presentation has been able to, they've gotten there or not. But one example is, in 1997, Dan Etete was the petroleum minister of Nigeria, Abacha's time. He was from 1995 to 1998. And one of the big examples is the Malabu oil and gas field. Malabu oil and gas field was juicy because in the oil and in the petroleum sector, when somebody comes to do exploration and even find or not find oil, the little that he finds, even if it is not commercial quantities, he will let you know about the geophysical characteristics as a country because you own the resources. So he knew that that field was juicy. He awarded the contract to himself, but his name was nowhere to be found in any of the documentation as a minister. Fast forward, they were able to sell the contract to Shell and ENI, and over the years, you could see that he has made a lot of money from that particular block, which was supposed to be, if you go, please go down the slide. But it's all about the risk of not knowing. We didn't know who was behind. How do I, we didn't know who was behind. About 1.1 billion paid from that particular block has ended up in accounts that is controlled by him or his cronies. Most of them has also been used to pay for some of his, money laundering fines in France, in Switzerland, in Italy, and of course have also used some to purchase his private jet and others. But that is the risk of not knowing. Then his name was never found in any of the documentations, as you may have said, right? Maybe it was his cousin, it was his brother, it was his friend, but none of them were the beneficial owners to that particular oil block. It was he himself who was the beneficial owner. That is another example. Another example is similar also in Nigeria as well. The former petroleum minister, because of her, when Buhari came into power, he didn't appoint any petroleum minister.
Amen.
Yeah, Buhari is himself the petroleum minister. Because during her time is when $20 billion got lost from the petroleum accounts. if you remember. 20 billion can get lost from a petroleum account. And that 20 billion that got lost, nobody other than Lamisi, who is currently the higher, is it here? They call it here? Or Emir of Kano. He was the central bank governor, and he couldn't keep quiet. He came out to confirm that, yes, $20 billion have been withdrawn from the Central Petroleum Funds, and we don't know where the money is. The risk of not knowing. The lady acquired some properties, and I got this case study from Giaba when I met the EFCC representative. He said, what did he do to acquire properties? About 56 houses in Nigeria was seized by the Yoko of Nigeria, EFCC. How did she do that? She had an errand boy, let the errand boy set up a company. Her name was nowhere to be found. The lady's name were nowhere to be found. That company that they had a banker, and they paid cash into the company's account and used that to purchase the properties. The properties were found in Banana Island. It was about 24 apartment, 18 flats, and about 5. And that was also one of the examples about the risk of not knowing, the way he acquired those properties. Are we having the presentation or not? So I'm not seeing it. So if you go down, I think because of time we have to bypass a lot of these ones. Yes. So this is the lady's way. This is an EFCC case study that I have formed. So if you look at it, he purchased the property from this lady. This is the property from Banana Island in Nigeria. And at the time, he paid 37.5 million for that. Her name was nowhere to be found, anywhere in documentation. The risk of not knowing who is behind. And by the time EFCC said they had seized it, the houses had made about $2.7 million in rent and 84.5 million naira in addition in rent that people had paid. And it belonged to her. And of course, I think she lives in London now. According to them, she has cancer now. But there are so many properties that even in the UK and the US had also seized from her when she was the petroleum minister, and now that she is no more the petroleum minister. So there are many, many examples. I just wanted to present a few of this to look at the reason why we should all be advocating for the beneficial ownership register. There are many, many examples, but because of time, I can't go through more because I only had 10 minutes. This is the 1.1 billion and how it has been distributed for Dan Etete and his cronies. Paid by ENI and Shell. It was supposed to go to a Nigerian government account. Apparently, it was also controlled by him. It's 800 million. And 520 went to one of his crony, and then 280 million was distributed to be paid for his money laundering fines and his private jet and other living assets that have been even seized in France and other countries as well. We also have Switzerland as well, where he has properties there as well. Please, let's move to the one last, this is in 2014-15. This was it done by GII? Maybe. GII, they do a lot of things they won't tell you, Mike. So this was, go back, please. This was in 2014, whereby Manasseh's investigating showed that 11 contracts competitively, published. All the companies used belong to Jospon. And this was as far back then, about 58 million Ghana cedis worth of contracts. All of them, some even had Chinese names as the owners at Registrar General. But the person behind was Jospon, winning all the waste management contracts in the whole of Ghana. That is procurement fraud. But nobody knew after here until Manasseh did the investigation and found out. Please go ahead. Move ahead. I just want to show you the quick one on the Brazilian scandal. The reason why always NGOs are talking about GMPC, you may not understand. Of course, one evidence is what you've seen recently about the oil company we've set up in Cayman Islands, and it's not coming home. It's not coming home. And they are insisting. We are not saying they've done anything wrong, but we are saying they should, stay with what the law says. The law says any direct and indirect petroleum revenue should come into the Petroleum Holding Fund. Nigerians will tell us that don't follow our footsteps. Angolans will tell us don't follow our footsteps. In Nigeria, they allowed NNPC to maintain. The money comes to NNPC. They maintain what they want before they send the rest to government. And the corruption and NNPC becoming so powerful was because of those monies. We decided that no, let all the money come into one account and then we distribute back to the National Oil Company. In fact, when we started, it was not like that. The first year we got our oil money, GMPC kept their share before they transferred the rest to the government. And I think thanks to Tekpe, who knew that we mentioned this over again. In one of his amendments, the Petroleum Management Act, they made those changes to it so that the monies will come to our National Oil Company, our National Petroleum Fund before. In Brazil, some executives of Petrobras, actually, it became so powerful, the National Oil Company became so powerful that at some point, whoever became the head of the National Oil Company went ahead to become the president of Brazil. So the lady was the head of Petrobras before she went to become a president of Brazil. Because when you got there, the bribery and the monies you were able to acquire will help you push you to become the president of the country. Some executives arranged with construction firms because at some point they were doing a lot of construction and they also have a lot of money in terms of oil. They control the oil in the country as their National Oil Company. The worst part is that Petrobras was 49% listed on US Stock Exchange. So you may think, oh, they are succumbed to, public governance and then they are better. 51% controlled by the government. And therefore government has to appoint the head and all that. But when they did that, go back to the slide. Back one slide back. The challenge was that they were able to use shell companies, paper companies, for the companies to pay the bribe into the paper company. And the paper company transferred the money back to the head of the Petrobras and then the political executives. The risk of not knowing. And it's so difficult. You may think they are purchasing something abroad, so they are doing external money there, not knowing it was bribes, 3% of all the kickbacks. And that was about $3.7 billion in bribes. Meanwhile, the company is listed on US Stock Exchange. The risk of not knowing. So you wouldn't know who is behind that particular company. You wouldn't know who controls the affairs of that particular company. But it was one of the ways to siphon money in payment of bribes as well. And the impact of this, when the petroleum prices collapsed in 2014-15, was the hardship on Brazilians, leading to into the impeachment of the president then. And that has provided another way for Lula da Silva to come back. He didn't have a chance, if not this. So these are some of the examples. What I wanted to show you was these examples shows that, beneficial ownership disclosure is key. And it's one of the tools that can help us reduce these incidents and also reduce the corruption. Do you know that, and I'm sure they're already looking into this, the issue about the former finance minister, it is true. I have firsthand gone to the office of the vice president before, and do you know what I saw? I saw only white people line up, Lebanese and Turkish. I asked the lady, why? He said they are coming to do business. But when instead of going to the channel of GIPC, they come here and then they get official approval. So when they go to GIPC, they are like, I'm coming from the office of the president or coming from office of the vice president. And that is not how it is done. If you go to Rwanda, you can't walk to the president office and take approval before you go to the relevant institution to do what you do. And that is the issue, because we have, sidelined the institutions. And that's the issue. So for what we do, if we don't get beneficial ownership to show us, because there have been evidence that sometimes in Iran, where they were able to use a company set up but for the former president's son, bribe him with 5.2 million as an advisory cost from Start Oil. He helped them to get the contract they wanted. It was an advisory cost, 5.2 million. I want to do that advice every year because I'll be very rich. So just examples I wanted to give so that we can all know the seriousness of why we need beneficial ownership disclosure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sammy. I think we can do well. Let's give it up to Sammy. And let's give it up to Favor as well. At this point, we would want to stretch a little bit. I'm sure you may have some questions or reactions, clarifications, but let's stretch up a bit. I pray that Sammy will spend 10 more minutes with us when we come back. So it is 28 after 11. Let's come back at 11:45. Thank you. And those who are leaving today, I think those who are staying, I think 5 of you or so. Can I get your names so we can make that arrangement for you? Those who will leave today, if you want to check out, you can check out now, but we have up to 2 o'clock to check out. Beyond 2 o'clock, any bill that comes, we would have to look up to the Lord. But so those who are checking out today can check out now or till 2 o'clock. And then those who are staying, it's 5 of you. And if I don't get any names, then I would inform the hotel that nobody is staying. And therefore, if you stay, it would be at your own cost. If I don't get names to make a book for you, then it means you are not staying. Thank you very much. So snack is out there to your right. There is there's a shed there on the right. Snack is there. We're coming back at 11:45. Thank you.